And we're back with the infamous Ivan Raiklin. This is our first time talking. Very nice to meet you, Ivan. I've seen you on X. You're fiery. Can you hear me? I don't think you
Oh,
can hear me. I,
there,
are you? I can hear
there,
you.
you're
I
back.
think. Okay, perfect. All right. So we have Ivan Raiklin, who is a huge warrior, very feisty. He's a Green Beret. He's a constitutional lawyer. I think you've worked for CIA or FBI or something like. You've got some intelligence
No,
connections at
neither.
one point,
The
right?
Defense
No,
Intelligence
but
Agency, the DIA.
okay. Okay. Well, whatever. It's um and you have been the in an interesting lawsuit. So most of us COVID warriors are suing people, but you are actually on the other end of that. You have somebody a COVID Nazi coming after you, which is shocking. Um, and, and I hope so I tried to tag her. Her name is Terry Adirim. I think I'm saying that right. She is a listen to this because she gets very bothered when Ivan talks about on social media. So let's all tag her in the comments so that she's watching us. And I don't know. Is the lawsuit still active against you, Ivan?
Yeah, so let me get folks kind of up to date on what's going on. Obviously, I've watched your work, and I want to say thank you, publicly, of all the work that you've done to fight against the COVID Nazis that you call, the COVID tyranny. So I recently retired, I guess, August of 2022, and from the military, and I have essentially taken it upon myself to be as a hobby, fight tyranny. And one of those components of tyranny was the whole COVID op, right? I think it's a massive component of the last 11 years of treason, as I like to call it. And when you look at that particular subcomponent of the 11 years of treason, that category, obvious names come up: the Anthony Fauci's, the Andrew Cuomo's, the Newscoms of the world, right, at the state levels, and then Debbie Burks and a lot of those bigger names. But what a lot of people fail to miss is that, and I always said this from the get-go, the hardest nut to crack for the reversal of the illegal actions and activity of our government and institutions will be the department, what used to be the Department of Defense and now the Department of War. So what I like to say is, when you're thinking of overall the origins of COVID and how Fauci funded the lab incident, and it was essentially the architect for the whole COVID op at a big picture level, at the national level, within the Department of War, like Fauci's name is synonymous with the name that you just mentioned, because she happened to be the Assistant Secretary of Defense for Health Affairs. And I'm not sure if you're able to screen share here. I think actually I'm able to screen share. If you don't mind, I can pull up the actual memos that we're going to refer to kind of discuss the lawsuit and how it came to fruition. Is that something that is okay with you?
Yeah, if you know how to do that, go for it. I have no idea on my end. Maybe the producers can help.
So, no, this is perfect. So, bottom line here is that I was using my First Amendment, like I always do, to the maximum. And I always like to increase our First Amendment landscape. And so that entails moving the Overton window, which you were participating in, pushing it back against COVID. And so I essentially said that she was behind the unlawful implementation of COVID within the Department of Defense, because even though Lloyd Austin, what I call the acting fake secretary under a belligerent, illegitimate regime of yesteryear, wrote an order, it was written lawfully because it only mandated FDA approved products that were actually legitimately FDA approved and then subsequently produced to then be consumed in entities or places where the BLA license, the biologic license agreement, allowed for those products to be created in to meet the necessary requirements of the FDA. Well, that never took place. And so what was actually being consumed, distributed, and consumed by military service members was not the FDA approved product. And so even though that was the case, in
And hold on.
September,
What? Real quick. Wait, real quick. Why did they do that? Do you know? Like, why did they not just put out the FDA approved product? Why did they use the other product that was under EUA? Or what did
So
you
when
what
you
do you
say
think?
they,
Why?
when you say they, I'm assuming you're referring to why did Lloyd Austin and the entire Office of Secretary of Defense, or are you talking about the FDA?
Well, okay. So from what I understand, there were two versions of the shot. There was an
Right. So the one
EUA
that was
version
under
that
emergency use authorization was the Pfizer
mhm,
BioNTech, right? It was the
right.
Moderna first one, and then it was the J&J. All three were under emergency use authorization. And when you read the law, there's a new documentary that just came out. Sam Shumate just put it out on his X account. If you haven't seen that, and as well as the Terminal CWO Telegram, I highly urge you to watch that. It lays it out the legal framework. But I'm in short, in summary, I'm going to explain it this way: is that an emergency use authorized product requires that there be what's called informed consent. And so you have the right of refusal to say, you know what, great. I appreciate you informing me about this new product. I take the personal decision of weighing the risk versus reward. And I'm going to say thank you, but no thanks. Have a nice day. When there's the only time that doesn't have to take place, where it can be coerced and compelled only in the population of the Department of Defense service members, is when a president writes a waiver to that particular legal framework. That was never done. Okay. And it's only FDA approved products such as the Pfizer BioNTech, or excuse me, Pfizer Comirnaty version of the jab, the FDA approved one, purportedly. That was the only one that could be compelled, because that was the first one that was FDA approved in August of the following day, August 23rd, 2021 is when FDA approved it. And August 24th was when Lloyd Austin, the fake Secretary of Defense, put his order out saying that you can use interchangeably, but you can only compel the FDA approved one. The problem with that is that the FDA approved one was never created. Like, the concoction was never mixed together to create. So I'll use an example. If this is the emergency use one, and this is the FDA approved one, this one here was never created. It was just a piece of paper
And
saying it
why?
was.
But why?
So that,
Why?
because the legal framework says that if you're taking the FDA approved one and you're injured, mutilated, murdered, then you're going to have recourse against the big pharma companies, meaning Pfizer and effectively Albert Bourla, the CEO, who's constantly invited into this White House, right? Which is disgusting and unacceptable. But we'll get to that. So this one here, if you're injured, mutilated, murdered, well, guess what? The insurance companies are just going to say, sorry, you just committed suicide, because it's clear that the law says that if you consume this emergency use authorized product, you're taking on all risk. And the big pharma company is taking on zero of the risk. So we're going to say, this thing's FDA approved. We're not going to make it, but we're going to compel you to take this one. A total bait and switch. And the way that worked in the Department of Defense at the time, I'm going to say Department of Defense because this is what it was called at the time, is that Lloyd Austin said that now that we have this approved one, we'll accept if you take this one, but you can't sue. But this one doesn't exist. But the implementation memo that came a month later, several weeks later, which was signed by the lady that you just introduced, the Assistant Secretary of Defense for Health Affairs, she said and compelled that you have to take the emergency use authorized one. That's called, where I'm from, and with my closest 7 billion friends, we would call that an unlawful order. So what does that unlawful order look like? Therein lies the screen share, if I may. Stand by as I pull it up. There it is. So screen share. And hopefully there it is. So let's zoom in.
Yep. No.
We take a look. Mandatory vaccine of service members using the Pfizer BioNTech and Comirnaty COVID-19 vaccines. She's mandating the emergency use authorized one. DoD healthcare providers will use both BioNTech COVID-19 vaccine interchangeably for the purpose of vaccinating service members in accordance with Secretary of Defense memo, mandatory blah, 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 the one that Lloyd Austin signed on August 24th of 2021, the day after that FDA approved the thing that didn't exist. This was dated, you can see here, it's hard to see, but September, what is that, 14th of 2021. Well, problem with that is when you look at this memo, so an assistant secretary of defense is a lower rank than an undersecretary of defense. So on May 7th of 2025, the undersecretary of defense says the implementation, says here, January, now Department of Defense has since rescinded coronavirus 2019 vaccination mandate, which was unlawful as implemented. That is a massive statement because it is now the Undersecretary of Defense on behalf of the Secretary of Defense is saying that the implementation of that unlawful order, meaning this thing right here, was unlawful. So riddle me this.
Wait, when was that second letter produced?
May 7th of this year. Oops, let me get over here. We got a problem, don't we?
Yeah, and then that's what resulted in reinstatement, right, of people in the military.
Yeah, so now we're at a point, let me stop the screen share. Now we're at a point where the Department of War is telling the world that that memo signed by the Assistant Secretary of Defense for Health Affairs was unlawful, which means if I'm exercising my First Amendment over the last several years, explaining that the architect or the author of that memo promulgated an unlawful order that resulted in deaths, let's just say that there were some deaths associated with that. And I think the DMED data, the Defense Medical Epidemiological data that I was shown before it was manipulated would support that. Also watching what you had been advocating the last several years, also what Teresa Long, with Doc Pete Chambers, what Sam Sigalov, what Sam Shoemate, what Terminal CWO, what where should I stop? Because there's so many examples of it. Dr. McCullough, Dr. Robert Malone, everybody out there that was talking about this basically showed evidence to include CDC's own Wonder database, the Vaccine Adverse Events Reporting System, shows to this day 38,000 plus were slaughtered as a result of these jabs. And the highest number were from the Pfizer product. Well, this memo right here, folks, I'm going to bring it up again. This was at a time when the Pfizer one was the only one that was quote unquote approved, but not created. And so how many service members died as a result of this unlawful order? If you can show that there were several, and there's evidence to support that, then to say that an individual was at least a causal link with this unlawful order, with those deaths, like what words would you describe that individual?
Well, don't we have that information? Shouldn't that information be very easy to get?
I'm not sure if it's easy to get, but it's accessible, and it will be brought forward in very granular detail should we have to go to that stage of the litigation, which we will. I'll say this. Let me ask you this. Hypothetically, if someone signs an unlawful order and death results from that unlawful order to the tune of, say, 10, 100, several hundred, would that meet the threshold of genocide? It's a debatable point, right?
I believe so. Yeah.
So then if I were to...
It's like sending everybody to the gas chambers,
like that,
right?
Right. If I were to use language like that, that's truthful, Can I be sued for defamation when it's truthful?
Do you
You can
know
try.
Terry Adirim? Do you know her? Have you ever met her?
I have not.
Right. So you just tweet something about her and she's going to sue you?
Yep, kind of like the FBI director's future former ex-girlfriend, right? The future former
Right.
FBI director's future ex-girlfriend is doing the same thing, right?
Right. Well, okay. So, and hey, I've been on the other end of that. I had a hospital come after me viciously. But I wasn't a public figure, and they said I was dangerous. And when I basically said, all I said was vaccine mandates are wrong. But I assume Terry Adirim is a public figure. Am I correct?
Well, she was a senior official at the Department of Defense, right? So all I did was
And
I
she's
was hoping I laid a mousetrap, because usually if you watch kind of how I operate, I like to lay mousetraps, and then with a nice big fat thing of cheese. And so luckily in this instance, the mouse took the bait, because now it puts everyone in a position of being able to, like, I'm happy to disclose all my stuff. I've already been scrutinized and looked at by the Biden criminal syndicate. I've been investigated more than Trump, like easily, across DOD, DOJ, DHS, Intel community. Why? Because I was an insider. And so they were able to navigate unlawfully amongst all that, to include Jack Smith, right? So they already subpoenaed and looked at all my stuff. And I've over almost 24 investigations that I know of were conducted on me. Okay. So great. Now it's our turn. So they've already done discovery, if you will, and they can do it again on me, whatever. But it goes both ways, right? Which is I'm happy to do. But the problem with that is I'm kind of in a bad position, because the lawsuit that was filed against me, it's what's called failed to state a claim upon which relief can be granted. So it doesn't even if all the inaccuracies and factual inaccuracies and lies that were included in the complaint are considered true, it still doesn't meet the threshold of defamation. And oh, by the way, also I'm being sued for conversion, because she thinks I took ownership of her Twitter account and her direct messages. I don't have that. The only direct message that I have was provided to me by a third party that direct messaged her and screenshotted their own direct message to this woman and sent it to me. And so all I did was screenshot and shared it. I'm like, oh, interesting.
Well, so I thought the case was dismissed, but with prejudice.
So it was
with prejudice.
It's called
no, without.
no.
Without
So
prejudice.
it was against me. It was dismissed without prejudice, giving the plaintiff, meaning her, 21 days to refile, which at the 11th hour on the 21st day, the refiling was submitted with several hundred more pages of the complaint, amending it.
Wow.
Nothing really new was added. And then we were supposed to have a hearing on Halloween, but the judge decided to make a decision on the pleadings, meaning on the paperwork, and not have a hearing. And then the plaintiff amended for a second time the complaint, but this time, lo and behold, she added several defendants, because I'm not the only defendant here. I'm big time, doctor. I'm at the levels of the CIA. The whole CIA is being sued. The director of the CIA, wow. The entire intel community in the form of the director of national intelligence and Tulsi Gabbard, a few other defendants, and me, private citizen Ivan Raiklin. Why? Because I love exercising the First Amendment by spitting truth. That's very painful. You know the whole adage, the truth always hurts? Wow, it must have hurt really bad to be able to launch a lawsuit. So I'm now in a position now, basically because the government was shut down, we were in this holding pattern. And so we're waiting on the government defendants to respond to their side of the complaint as defendants. So when was it? Last Thursday that the government was reopened, Wednesday, Thursday. So basically the next Wednesday, right before Thanksgiving, I think is the deadline for the CIA, John Radcliffe, the director, Tulsi Gabbard, the DNI, to respond on, because they're being sued because they claim that my First Amendment sounds that were truthful resulted in her being fired in the following sequence of events. Mr. Raiklin made sounds that were presented to Laura Loomer. Laura Loomer went to Donald Trump in April at a meeting to recommend that he contact Director Radcliffe to go ahead and fire this woman because after the election, she went and started working at the CIA. Okay? So there you have it. None of it's true.
Well, and
I didn't communicate with Laura Loomer.
Scared.
She didn't recommend to Donald Trump the name the name you mentioned, and he didn't know to even call John Radcliffe. It's like, it's so hilarious.
Well, I noticed how she's too scared to Laura Loomer, right? Because logically, wouldn't you think Laura Loomer would be part of this lawsuit?
Well, that's if you're dealing with someone that's logical and rational. No one can make sense of this lawsuit. And so, which begs the question, who's the attorney of record? I know who it is, and we'll have to go through the motions, and already won once, and we're going to move to win again, and then it's going to move on to, so as we transition from defense, hopefully in the short term, we'll go into offense. Whether it's I'm going to go on offense whether I'm a defendant or a plaintiff. It doesn't really matter, right? It's just I'm a defendant in really name only, right? Okay, great. But it provides a venue to litigate the entire unlawful, what we just laid out, okay? And it allows us to inform a court, a federal district court, to go ahead and see the evidence. I mean, it's so clear. I mean, that I just presented, and her involvement in it. And my statements are factual statements that most people maybe years ago would have said that you're crazy, whack job. But the institution known as the Department of War agrees with me through the Undersecretary of Defense, Undersecretary of War now. And so we're going to move forward. Hopefully in the next week or so, we're going to get a response. And it's funny and fun because I'm literally being defended by the CIA and the DNI because they're co-defendants. While I just sit back and relax as the DOJ defends the CIA and the DNI, and I'm just like this bystander watching it, laughing from the sidelines.
Well, but what if, is there a chance they'll settle, and then will you have to settle if they want to settle?
No, it doesn't work that way. I'm not settling I'm settling for the maximum. You think I'm just going to fake this Department of Retribution, the Secretary of Retribution? No, I'm going to live it till the end. So my goal in all of this is that even with elements of this administration, to include the White House, that want nothing to do with COVID accountability, we have enough people now being reinstated and more being reinstated. And as more people like you and me are more vocal, there's no option. Just like what Thomas Massie did and forced the vote nearly unanimously with the Epstein files, we're not going anywhere. If you're going to ignore us, you're going to bring in Albert Bourla, you're going to bring in Mark Zuckerberg and Bill Gates into the White House, you're only going to piss us more off. And now we're going to mobilize and weaponize against those that weaponized against us. And in the process, there will have to be collateral damage all the way to the top of the legislative branch, executive branch, and the judicial branch of our government. Because we're done. The momentum is now on our side. We just saw it play out this last few days. You're not going to bamboozle us with another bait and switch. You're going to continue to piss us off by endorsing COVID Democrat criminal Andrew Cuomo. No, you just pissed me off even more. So there we go. I'm going to do as many shows to mobilize the truth, and we're going to get to it, and we're going to crush anyone in our way.
What kind of information do you think you can get from Discovery?
Well, considering she was a senior official at the Department of Defense and at the Central Intelligence Agency, we'll probably be able to get and work the entire network of those involved in the origins of COVID, the planning for COVID with Event 201. Remember all that stuff? Event 201. You're familiar with it? That was all
Why
from
don't you
good
talk about
old.
that real quick?
So Event 201 was the exercise scenario that was created a year before COVID was released that laid out exactly how it played out. And so everyone that planned and participated in that, many from the CIA, right? Remember, like I said at the beginning of our interview, the story arc of the last 11 years started with the 2014 treason that had the Autopen had to pardon, which was John Brennan as the CIA director ran the whole coup in Ukraine to place a new leader so that 10% could go to the big guy through his surrogates, through his crack baby son on the board of Burisma, right? That was the first boilerplate 10% for the big guy. And then from there, the fifth, like another arc was the 51 spies who lied that covered for the Biden laptop were mostly all CIA. Okay. Brennan being one of them. So once you start to see the CIA component of who this plaintiff communicated with that hired her on and all of their communications, I think we're going to have a treasure trove of information showing the 11-year arc of treasonous, seditious conspiracy that will help play into the January grand jury that is being impaneled down in Florida in Fort Pierce to showcase the seditious conspiracy. This is just yet another vector. So I think she'll be another vector of being able to prove the entire 11 years of treason. And that's why I created the deep state target list. It lists categories of all this stuff. And the COVID cabal, criminal cabal category is only one component of it. And again, like it incorporates seditious conspiracy from both political parties, right? Leadership from both political parties. And I guess we have to deal with that. We have to address all of them.
Today's CIA, has there been reform? Can we trust the current CIA? What are your thoughts on?
Have you heard
Trump's
of the
CIA?
current CIA director firing anyone? Have you heard anything about that?
I have not. No, who is the current CIA director?
He's one of my co-defendants, John Ratcliffe.
Right.
Okay. Now, I'm going to say this. My assessment is that 99% at least of the current CIA is loyal to John Brennan still. And he's still out there treasoning, right? Freely communicating, coordinating, organizing the coup, continuing to destroy our constitutional rights and the 51 affiliates, right? The 51 and all the people that are loyal to them. So this CIA is still pretty much controlled by the John Brennans of the world and those 51. The FBI is still controlled by.
Well, what is John Brennan doing right now?
I would guess that since he's free to walk freely, he's just treasoning. I mean, he's pulling up his phone and, in different groups, whatever he uses for an app, and it's like, hey, let's have a meeting. Let's figure out a way. He's probably the next 60 days. He's probably working with his incoming governor in Virginia, Abby Spanberger, who used to work at the CIA with him, and coordinating with the Democrat Attorney General so that on January 17th, when those two swear into a trifecta domestic Democrat terrorist organization controlling Virginia from Richmond, they're just going to take what Jack Smith, Fannie Willis, Alvin Bragg, and Letitia James didn't get to do and continue to do it from the authorities of a surrogate lackey of John Brennan, Abby Spanberger, who's going to be the incoming governor in 60 days. So when people say, the midterms and then Trump's going to get impeached. No, I mean, he's going to get destroyed politically starting on January 17th, like on that day. So I guess my recommendation would be maybe this administration needs to actually hire some more Democrats to actually stop the lawfare from happening, because Republicans won't do it. They're cowards. They're worthless. They're complicit cowards. So, I mean, who's doing anything? Bobby Kennedy is the only, and Tulsi Gabbard are really the only two people in the admin that are actually have some courage, former Democrats. So maybe, like, you see where I'm going here?
Right.
It's disgusting. We went from
Talk
a
about.
China
Go ahead.
first illegitimate Biden criminal syndicate to a big farm to a continuation of a big pharma first and now Israel first administration. That's basically what I observe.
Talk
All to get
about
the Nobel Peace
CIA and
Prize.
yeah, well, talk about CIA and COVID and their involvement, and where are they responsible for the pandemic?
Mm. So the way I view this is that when Anthony Fauci testified and he was asked by either it was Brad Winstrup, the COVID Select Committee, or maybe Oversight Committee Chairman James Comer. I have a video. Basically asked him if he communicated with the Intel community, and he said he did. So then which components, right? Well, when you start to break it down, like who's responsible for foreign intelligence? It's the CIA, right? So then who within the CIA was he communicating with and coordinating with, right? And why? I think if I were to recommend anything right now to folks in the admin, is that the director of national intelligence, Tulsi Gabbard, who's a co-defendant of mine now with the Second Amendment complaint, I'm proud of that. She could go ahead and order her, it's called the Directors Initiative Group that she created back in April, to go ahead and look at the origins of COVID and actually release what they have, because that was one of the, if I'm not mistaken, that was one of the charters of that organization that she created. And so we haven't heard anything yet from them. It would be nice to see and hear declassified who Anthony Fauci was communicating with, and then correlate that with some of the disclosures that Senator Rand Paul has shown us of the funding of the NIAID that Fauci led for 40 years, when and how much went to the Wuhan Institute of Virology and all those communications, and whether or not there were CIA back channel communications as well, and the decision-making process. Once we expose that, the government holdings, and declassify that, and then maybe private communications, I suspect that you're going to have plenty for criminal referrals. But the problem is that
So we need.
Big Pharma Pam Bondi, who's the AG that represented Pfizer before she became AG, Pfizer was one of her clients in Florida. I mean, you really think that she's going to go after her former client? Seriously?
Right.
And by extension, all those in that ecosystem. And that was the main reason why they had to stop Matt Gaetz from being the AG, because he would have been going after all this. And it's problematic when Big Pharma funds the entire political industrial complex in DC, to include the White House and presidency of both parties. So that's where we come in.
Yeah.
The accountability
What
is
do you
coming from
think?
us. It's not coming from our government.
Right. What do you think the sticking point is? Is it Trump? Is it Susie Wiles? Is it Pam Bondi? Is it Stephanie Spear within HHS? Why has nothing been done about
Why does it have to
COVID,
be mutually
about the COVID
exclusive?
shots?
Why can't it be all of the above? Right?
Yeah.
At what point do you say, oh, you got to blame it on his staff because they duped him? They're controlling access. So, how many months and years are you going to blame subordinates for the principal's failures? A year? 4 years? Under a Pence administration, he was handled by Pence. Now another year he's handled by a chief of staff. So 5 years. Like, at what point do you say he's either like Biden, and so you can blame the staff because Biden was incompetent towards the end, right? At what point do you equate that and analogous to that situation? Or do you say, no, this individual is still lucid and competent, and so you have to lay the decision-making process on the individual that decided to endorse Democrat COVID criminal Andrew Cuomo, that slaughtered thousands, admitted to it on live TV that he slaughtered nursing home patients. That's who Donald Trump endorsed. So who do you blame it on?
Yeah.
Who do you blame the invitation into the White House, Albert Bourla? twice. Just saw him last night, right? Mucking it up with the guy that never released the Fauci files, Elon Musk.
What do you
So,
think about Israel and their involvement in this?
well, you got to ask Miriam Adelson. You know who that is?
Probably not as much as I need to know. So go ahead and
So Miriam
explain.
Adelson, when Donald Trump went to Israel and gave that speech, the most recent one, part of his speech included, "Oh, Miriam Adelson, she's really rich and she's more loyal to Israel than she is the United States, and she donates a lot of money to my campaign and her affiliated groups to the tune of 230 million." And then it begs the question, interesting. How can you correlate that and Albert Bourla's relationship with Israel, if there is any, and Netanyahu, and how much of the Epstein op was spearheaded by Israeli intelligence in conjunction with MI6 and the CIA? So as you pull that thread, most people that have an analytic, critical thinking mind would think there's at least a low level of confidence that there is a correlation. Okay? And then as you dig further, that low level of confidence through multidiscipline intelligence sources, open source, human intelligence, signals intelligence, start to support a higher confidence level that it's all interrelated. And that's where I'm at. I'm in the medium, inching towards high level of confidence that is the case. Now, if anybody has evidence that is inconsistent with that hypothesis, then by all means, I want to hear it. But I want to hear the evidence, not, "Oh, you're bad. You're name callers," right? The ad hominem attacks. I love them. I mean, like once you're exhausted with ad hominem attacking me for like an hour, 2 hours, a couple weeks, then once you've exhausted name calling me, and I'll say, "Yep, I'm all of that." Now that we've gotten past that, let's talk about what evidence do you have, whether it's Ben Shapiro, Mark Levin, or the others. Give me a rational reason of why you come to the conclusion of calling me names. Can't do it because then it
Well,
exposes their loyalties.
I want to go back to Israel though. So what spell it out for us that
Why?
are, well, what do you think? Do you think Israel how exactly is Israel involved with the COVID shot, with the pandemic? Spell it out. What your theory? I
That
know,
no, I haven't gone down that rabbit hole enough to be able to give you a very succinct, informed opinion on that. But what I will say is that a majority of Congress, based on my own empirical evidence of walking the halls of Congress, and I'm going to be starting to trickle out the video and picture testimony, if you will, on my X and other channels, where like to get the best outwardly facing resume of a member of Congress is take a picture of outside their office.
oh yeah.
And most of them have a flag of Israel. Most of them, or not
or
most,
a trans
most of them
flag.
have.
They also
Wait, hold up, I'm getting there. You're getting ahead of me here. So you're either going to have a Israel flag, a Ukraine flag, a CCP affiliated flag back in the day. Remember the Biden laptops matter, BLM, Biden laptops matter flag, or a fist, which is a CCP surrogate, right? CCP surrogate, big pharma, shill, or a self-mutilation flag, right? They call it something different, but it's basically self-mutilation. Lopping off penises, slapping on vaginas, slapping on some breasts here and there. So they're advocating for that, or for family mutilation. I'm talking about the different colored flags, right? So they fall into one or several of those categories. And that's problematic because these individuals are supposed to represent the United States, not a flag of another foreign country or of a foreign interest that is destructive to American society. Self-mutilation, family mutilation, right? It's like why would I have somebody representing me that advocates for self-mutilation? Like if that's physical violence. If you're willing to do physical violence on yourself, you're going to be prone to conduct physical violence on others. That's not acceptable. Okay. And so the thing is that people have to call it out for what it is, because that's what it is. I mean, it's disgusting. And so we're at a point where all of our institutions are completely captured, even though, this time around they got ours by them. Doesn't matter. They're still captured by all these other interests that are totally anathema, in contravention to what 90% of Americans even care to accept, right? It's totally against 90% of Americans. And so the way we mobilize folks is to do these conversations, present the evidence, and they lose their audience. Like faux news is on the decline. Criminal News Network is on the decline. MSLSD. I mean, the main DOJ reporter, national security reporter at MSLSD, since we're on the subject and we're talking about the CIA, I like to call the CIA. Well, let me just introduce you to yet another shared screen, if I may. Let's take a look here. Let's go to this one here. Heard of this guy? MSNBC reporter now. Ken Delanian. Do I need to move it over? I think. Let me see if that works. No. Ken Delanian, right? Sent CIA drafts of his stories before they were published. Another version of that article. Let me see here. CIA's mop-up man. LA Times reporter cleared stories with agency before publication. This was during Brennan's reign. He's now he's the lead DOJ reporter for the MSNBC crowd. Okay? Total bogus. Mop-up guy, right? Doing the CIA's bidding to manipulate America. Another example. Where did I put it? Yeah, I already did that one. Here we go. Ex-Tribune reporter said to have collaborative relationship with the CIA. You can't see it because it's partial screen. So, unless I do this. There. Now you can see it. Anyhow. Let me stop sharing screen.
Yeah, I don't think this gets enough attention, but our own government spent $11.5 billion on a propaganda campaign to spread the safe and effective narrative. And they launched this program on the exact same day that Houston Methodist became the first hospital in the country to mandate the shots, which was April 1st, 2021. And that was 5 months before Biden. And yeah, no doubt the CIA was probably involved in that as well.
I would say with a high degree of confidence that is the case. But we're waiting on Tulsi Gabbard to do the release. I would say that now that we're getting some traction and momentum on the January 6th front, again, Thomas Massie being one of the key figures behind it with his tenacity on the pipe bomber, because once you unravel the pipe bomber and you link it to the framework of how Pelosi was able to run the Fedsurrection play, which falls within her statutory, authorities, which are, I don't want to go here too much, but if I bring in this particular tab, these are the authorities upon which this Fedsurrection was created by Nancy Pelosi. 2 USC 1967. It's a law enforcement arm of the U.S. legislative branch, right? And so let me say this, that the individual that's being attacked the most in Congress by this admin is the very person that is exposing J6 and the pipe bomb narrative, the Fedsurrection, is the very person that was the only one that stood their ground for the Constitution, to make sure that everyone voted in person on the COVID relief package, the COVID op, right, back in 2020, during a Trump presidency, and is the only one with Marjorie Taylor Greene effectively in a very vocal way calling out that hey, we need to expose this blackmail scheme, right? And unfortunately, the White
Yep.
House is not on our is fighting us. The White House is fighting
Right.
us on the Epstein
And
release. The Speaker of the House is fighting us on the Epstein release in the House, the Republicans. And they're also fighting us on COVID exposure and accountability. We're going to devour them. And we're not even going to burp
right.
in the process.
Well, yeah,
That's
this
it.
this release of the Epstein files is a huge win for the people, right? Because the Republicans were against it and we won, and the people won.
We haven't
And I
won
hope
yet. This
that
is
is a
phase one.
reminder.
We've won phase one.
Well,
Now we're going to move to
right.
phase two, where we're going to expose elements of the DOJ that are going to continue to try to cover up and say, hey, due to national security, we can't release this person's name or that person's name because they're part of intelligence. No, those are the names that need to be released. Sorry. We have enough whistleblowers and I think enough people that are now with courage, and we have enough million, thanks to Elon again and Rumble, there's enough people out there that is going to force this to come out. Now they can slow walk it, slow roll it. It's going to be, it's going to be politically bloody, if you will. But at the end of the day, the same result will happen. Just like we drug and teabag, and you call it what you want, and embarrassed and drug into forcing this administration to apologize and walk it back, we're going to do the same thing on COVID. And the main reason that I suspect is that Jared Kushner's fingerprints are on everything COVID and everything Israel. He is the conduit to this entire scheme. He was the shadow governor of the COVID task force under Donald Trump. That is why the cover up continues, in my estimation.
All right. Perfect. It's very clarifying. Well,
So there you
thank you,
go.
Ivan. This has been
Now
very
you know.
informative. And
Now a lot of people are going to be mad at me in the White House and use surrogates to contact me to tell me you can't say, tell Ivan to stop talking about that. And my response is, hey, why don't you start listening to us, and then you won't be embarrassed. Start listening to us,
right.
we will not embarrass you. Okay, that's it.
Well, thank you. Thank you for fighting so hard. And this has been very
You
informative.
inspired
And you
me.
have a hearing. we'll we'll uh, we'll have a little more answers to that lawsuit next week, right? Right before Thanksgiving, and
Yeah, I
keep us
think so. We'll see
posted.
some
But thanks
filings.
so
It'll
much.
be it's funny. It's funny. Every single pleading that's filed, because it's such a ridiculous lawsuit. It's fun. I
Well, thanks, Ivan. We'll bring you back on when we get some more developments in this
appreciate you.
lawsuit.
Thanks for
But
platforming
appreciate
me
you
and keep
coming.
fighting. Thanks for what you're doing.
Yeah, likewise. Likewise.
All right.